I'm Bryan Dale, and I'm a member of the Toronto chapter of the Council of Canadians. I'm also a master's student at the University of Toronto here in geography, and I'm doing some research on climate justice, so there were a couple of reasons that I wanted to go down to Rio. And I think Raul actually did a great job of summarizing sort of what was going on there. I'll mention a couple of things about the summit, and there's a few additional pictures that are running in the background that will sort of give you an idea of the flavor. I thought that the pictures were good at conveying how much energy there was, how many people there were, and it was exciting. It was nice to see actually a very sophisticated collection of social movements, or a collective social movement, coming together in Rio to say there are alternatives to what's going on down the road. They're sort of very enclosed bubble of a conference that was happening that was 40 minutes away from downtown, maybe an hour. The social movements were that put this together, including Via Campesina, which is one group that I'm focusing on with my research. They put together, from what I could see, having done a bit of reading on social movements, a very sophisticated plan. And as Raul said, they were talking not just about the problems that are being faced around the world. It's important to see those commonalities, but they were talking about the structural causes of what's going on environmentally and socially, and in terms of environmental degradation and local struggles, but also talked about the solutions. And they did a great job, as Raul mentioned, about coming up with campaigns as well, talking about how to move things forward. And I thought that was great, that people were talking about the complexities of a lot of these issues, but also figuring out where do we want to be, which I think is probably going to be more inspiring to people than talking about problems all the time, and also getting out there and saying this is how we're going to actually get there, and this is how we're going to do some of this work in merging the struggles. Can you guys hear okay at the back? Am I projecting that now? We're good? Okay. And I think that that's important in terms of things that we can learn here. I'll just make a couple of general comments about, our situation. I'm guessing that because everyone's here in the room on a Monday night, that we've all drank the Kool-Aid, and we're all pretty much working on a lot of these issues, environmental or other social issues, in some way, shape, or form, right? I think that one thing that we can take, though, from a social movement like the one that Raul and I observed in Rio is that we have to figure out what it actually means to us, what these issues mean to us, what's at stake. From a green economy perspective, we probably don't realize, because there wasn't that much coverage of Rio Plus 20, and there certainly wasn't much coverage of the People's Summit, right? Unless you were there, you probably didn't know what was going on. So the what actually is at stake in terms of the green economy? I heard a lot of cynicism was going on in the mainstream media in terms of, well, we didn't expect a lot to happen, and so not a lot happened. Well, that's just going to, I think, spawn more apathy, not action. And but actually, there will be things that will come out of it, because we have this whole process that is continuing, and this was a key turning point in terms of there being an actual framework for market-based mechanisms to move forward, thanks to the United Nations and wealthy countries that tried to make sure that this green economy conversation was set up that way. And so there will be a great deal, I think, at stake for all of us, not just in the global south, but there will be increased inequality. We'll probably have another bubble because this is just the capitalist model struggling to get on its feet and looking for more answers. And if you look at the different types of market-based mechanisms that they're talking about, it's ridiculous to think that these are actual solutions in terms of moving forward. And it hasn't worked in Europe in terms of emissions trading and this type of thing, and I don't expect that it's going to work elsewhere. So in terms of climate change, the other thing that I think that, because climate change is near and dear to my heart in terms of my research, I think that the other thing that we need to think about is what actually the impacts are going to be, and I won't go too far into that right now, but including from a local perspective, whether you want to call that Toronto or Ontario or Canada, we need to get away from talking about parts per million and how much carbon is going to be in the atmosphere and glaciers melting. All these things are important, but they seem very far away. And we need to think about, I think, the human face of this. And out of the summit, that's exactly what happened. They were talking about what was going on in terms of the problems and how and where they want to go. So quickly, I think I just want to mention that in terms of the some of the slogans that groups like Via Campesina and others are putting forward, one big one from a climate justice perspective is system change. And another thing that we, and I'm talking about the social movement down there in a pretty glowing perspective. I think that it was quite inspiring, but I'm not uncritical of it. I mean, I think that they need to do more work, and we all collectively need to do more work in thinking about what system change means, and we need to articulate that and spend a lot more time figuring that out. Raul mentioned about merging the struggles. They did that pretty well at the People's Summit. You'll see some shots up here from plenary sessions where they were taking different ideas in terms of food sovereignty, which is a Via Campesina term that they came up with in the 90s, about the extractive industries, about the defense of the commons, and environmental justice, and all of these things, and merging them together. And in terms of, I mean, I mentioned food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and democratizing energy systems. I mean, these are all things that people were talking about in that context and coming up with some very specific ways to move forward. But ultimately, I think what will help is, you'll see some pictures here. I think there was one up there that talked about socialism being the only way to save the planet. And no to the false solutions of green capitalism. I mean, we need to take terms like capitalism and socialism and break them down a little bit and figure out, that they're not just these massive entities, right? I mean, change happens over time, and we need to figure out, okay, if it's socialism or social democracy that we're working towards, what does that look like? How is it different from capitalism? Do you have certain aspects of what we would consider a capitalist system involved in that or not? And, transportation and food and all these systems, energy, extractive industries, I mean, we need to think about all of it, including our consumption patterns and that kind of thing. And these groups, I think, we're doing a good job of bringing some of those issues to light. And we can certainly talk more about this. And you can look, if you look up the Cúpula dos Povos or the People's Summit, you'll see some of the report backs. Just Google it and you'll see some of the documents that look at the specifics of what ideas they came up with. I've just got a couple minutes, I think, right? Maybe 1 minute. I'll just say that I think in terms of figuring out where we need to go and what the People's Summit was doing well in terms of feeding up all of these ideas into a larger document and a larger process. There are campaigns that are coming out of this, and I think that if we want to move forward, Raul mentioned a number of different campaigns. But we need to figure out how others are being successful. I mean, the social movement there is working outside of the political system much more than we seem to be comfortable with in Toronto and in Canada. I mean, I support the NDP and I'm actively involved in many of their campaigns, and I'll say that right now. But at the same time, we don't need to be just shackled, I think, by electoral processes and only think about things in terms of voting, right? I mean, that's not necessarily being engaged citizens. I think that we need to think beyond that. And they demonstrate that very well. They're out in the streets, and as you can see from some of these pictures, they know how to have a good time. I mean, if you could hear the soundtrack to this, it'd be well, you wouldn't be able to hear me, but it's overwhelming. It was a big party at the same time as being a protest, and they know how to do that well. And I think that it would be great if we could also talk a little bit tonight about how, whether it's through political processes and also through others at the same time, we can work in parallel and in conjunction to sort of move some of these ideas forward, because they seem to be doing that very well in Latin America, but throughout the world, these social movements that came from all over the world were actively doing that. So I'll stop there. Thanks.